Welcome to another episode. This one's going to be fun. Bryan's back from Honduras. I'm back from India. So we're finally back to recording after our international retreats. And we came back to like a pretty optimistic earnings season for advertisers. So yeah, Bryan, first of all, how are you feeling after your Honduras retreat?
Man, I am revitalized. It's nice to get away. I did buy, if you're ever traveling overseas, I highly recommend you get one of those. Like I have a Solis, it's SOLIS 5G. It's a little device about the size of your phone and you get satellite internet. So I paid $9 and dude, I was up in the mountains of Honduras and I still had 5G internet. So it was a great way for me to still check our Shopify dashboard and performance. And, you know, I just got into the habit of just checking it or in the morning and then shutting it off the rest of the trip. But it was good. It was much needed and definitely something that I want to do more often in the future. How about you? How's your trip to India?
It was good, man. See, I think this is the thing. There are two roles in every company where you can't really turn off. One is the head of marketing and the other is the CEO. And it's like, you know, these two roles, it's like when you're responsible for revenue, basically, and like things can change every day, it's super hard to actually turn off. I mean, the same thing is true for salespeople, like at B2B companies. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, I was a 12-hour time zone difference away. Every morning, though, I was like catching up on what's going on before people left for the day in SF. And then I would just like chill the rest of the day, spend time with family. But yeah, it was good. It was good. And I was like talking to, I like work with a coach. And so I was talking to my coach yesterday evening and he was just like, man, you sound so different. You sound like very much not as stressed about the business as you were before. And it was, I think it's a combination of that and like the business is like going way better. But yeah, man, the vacations are awesome. Or like the trips are awesome. They're revitalizing. Yeah.
Much needed.
Exactly. All right, so let's switch back into earnings season. Facebook did super well, as did Google.
They did.
Like big tech is basically on a tear. My retirement account is not as stressed anymore, which is nice. Yeah. And I think that the one thing that I was most excited by, I don't know if you caught this data point, was impression count was up for a variety of reasons, and we can sort of double click on that. You brought up an interesting point earlier, but impression counts were up while average cost per impression was down. And so I was like, man, this is like great news for advertisers. So I guess like one thing I'm curious from your perspective as an operator is, have you felt the decrease in CPMs or like, you know, the effectiveness in the ads as an advertiser yourself?
Yeah, so to give the listener some context, that I pulled up the earnings here. So ad impressions in the second quarter were up 34% year over year. So compared to previous Q2, and average price per ad decreased 16% year over year. So like when you take those numbers, right, it definitely feels like, you know, there's potentially more ad spend, more impressions, more users, more inventory. But then with the decrease of price per ad decrease of 16%, it's like, okay, is that our CPMs, right? That's what Meta bills on. So our CPMs decreased 16%. You know, I'm not feeling an exact 16% decrease in CPMs. I will say our CPMs have decreased, right? Like they're down about 5 to 8% conservatively. Year over year might be a little bit higher, might be closer to 10, but then like quarter over quarter, I think we're down about 5%. What makes it tricky though is like, you know, the CPM decrease isn't necessarily translating into a cost per click decrease. So I'm noticing that our cost per clicks on the other hand are actually increasing. We're about 5% up quarter over quarter. And there'll be weeks where like it's like 15-20% up. I think when we look at like January and February, we're down 20% in our click-through rates and we're up 23% in our cost per clicks. And so, you know, I can't help but wonder if, and let's take away ad fatigue, let's take away any sort of creative issues out of the equation. Meta has been investing a lot in those multi-user placements where you'll be scrolling and you'll see this ad, and at the very bottom, you'll see a series of ads underneath it. And so those are counting as impressions. There's zero visibility into the distribution of how many of your impressions are being served. It's all just being lumped into Facebook newsfeed or Instagram newsfeed. When I actually got interviewed, well, maybe it was 2.5 years ago by Meta, when the product team was developing this placement, this solution. And it's the one thing I requested. I said, look, advertisers won't mind. It makes sense that the purpose of this product was to create contextual targeting, meaning if you were watching a video about a sports athlete, the ads underneath that video in this carousel would be about athletics. It would be activewear, Nike, basketball shorts, shirts, etc. So it makes sense. It was sort of this response, a very muted, but a response to iOS 14 and really understanding how Meta can use its own in-platform signals to provide better contextual ads based off of the content that people were engaging with or watching. And my feedback was, I don't think advertisers are going to mind that it's there. It's a great way to open up the auction, open up inventory, I should say. But please ensure that one, we can opt out of this, and two, that we have reporting so that we can see what impressions are served in a proper 1x1, 4x5, news feed placement, and how many of those impressions are just being counted that's lumped up with a bunch of other brands and advertisers right next to your carousel. And so that didn't happen with reason. It makes sense. You can if I'm Meta, it's why would I give that to you? I can now blend my numbers and I can give the impression that your CPMs are down, but in reality, your impression that you paid for is super low quality. You're in there with a bunch of noise. Sure, there's relevance, but it's not you competing in this sort of horizontal scroll. It's you competing, vertical scroll. You're now competing in this horizontal scroll in a tiny little spot with a bunch of other brands. So all in all to say, great to see that cost per ad impression is down, but I'm skeptical in that I doubt many are seeing that translate into their cost per clicks. I think they're seeing in their CPMs, but I think the reason why they're seeing it in their CPMs is because we're now technically showing up impressions for lower tiered placements.
Yeah, the other thing that I've started to notice is that a lot of ads are starting to show a pretty significant fraction into Reels. I'm curious if you guys are seeing this too, but those also have a lower click. I mean, just like TikTok, right, has a lower click-through rate. Those also have a lower click-through rate. And so this is definitely one of the things that I've wondered is you're getting way more impressions, which is, again, it's good because fundamentally prospecting is prospecting. You get in front of the consumer and that's great. If it's an incremental consumer, that's great. But yeah, clicking through and actually having it be direct response that you can attribute revenue to, that's why people advertise on Facebook. And yeah, I'm wondering if you're seeing a similar thing on Reels, because they also claimed in this earnings report that Reels monetization is starting to do way better. And I was I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean that the advertiser is able to do way better on Reels? Or does that just mean that you're charging more for a Reels impression, or just Reels usage has gone up, and so your volume of revenue has gone up just because there's more inventory to show in Reels, right? So it was not a really well, it was an intention, I think it was an intentionally vague statement, but it's not obvious to me that Reels placements are still as good as either an IG story or IG feed or Facebook feed placement. Are you seeing anything in your delivery on or have you heard from other brands? So I'll tell you, for us, for the brands that we work with, IG feed, IG stories is generally the best for lifestyle brands. And then if it's an older audience, Facebook feed is also very good. But it's rare that we see Reels pop off as a very effective CPA delivery point. So
I see the same, Reels and stories, and this is one of the best practices are there for guidance, but you should always try to bend the rules to fit your needs, right? There's never an overarching, this is what you should be doing. It's a starting point, and then break the rules as you validate that you should be breaking those rules. One of the rules that we break often is, not having 9x16 assets and asset placement customization. We've A/B tested it.
Wow.
We've A/B tested it multiple times. Whenever we have it, it increases the ad spend towards those placements. Makes sense, right? The system's like, thanks for giving me this placement. I can win more auctions because the ad quality is better, right? You've given me a native format asset that I can use in this placement. Whenever that happens, the overall ad performance decreases because those placements don't do that well for us. When we look at the total, like where we do well, where we win, it's marketplace, search, and news feeds. Outside of that, reels and stories are there. I'm sure they're incremental and it's very validating. But in terms of just, efficiency and overall where we can maximize value, it's not an area that we do very well in. That said, our investment levels are high in Meta, so it's not like we don't ever just turn it off. We have to keep it because we need that we need the ability to maneuver in the auction and win as much as possible due to our spend levels. If not, then our CPMs and our cost per clicks would be even more inflated. It's an interesting test. I think where we haven't tested it well is in an incrementality study to walk away and say like, yep, having these placements, and even though the ROAS is lower, it's actually more incremental. And that's ideally what you want to optimize for. You want to optimize towards what is driving, what conversions are being driven because of those ads, not because of some hodgepodge someone was going to buy anyway. And, oh, that's right, here it is. The ad got served and the ad takes credit for it.
Yeah, totally.
What's interesting, I will say, to your point about Reels monetization and just overall more impressions with Reels and maybe more usage. One other statistic that was really interesting out of the Q2 earnings was that their daily active people, right? And there's a clear differentiation there between people and users, but daily active people was up 7% year over year. And so there are more, accounts that are being made. Daily active users was up 5% year over year. And so there is continual growth. Unfortunately, it's not broken out, right? They put it as the family of apps. So whether this is Threads, Instagram, well, not Threads, but Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp, we can differentiate. But Facebook as a business and sort of its user base is growing. And that's good for advertisers. We want that. We want there to be more growth in the platform because that can help lead to CPM decreases as well as you have more inventory.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so speaking of delivery, let's switch to ASC. It's been 4 or 5 months since they rolled it out to everybody. Because I think it was in March, right? When they said
it was March.
We're gonna enable it for everybody, and now we're in mid-August. So, and I remember when it first came out. Okay, so I won't say which brand this was, but I was in this unbelievable situation where we were doing a test with a brand, okay, and at the time we were beating the control in a standard APO campaign relative to whatever their business as usual was. Fine. And then ASC came out and they turned on ASC with shops and it ripped. I mean, I cannot tell you, it was 4x of their business as usual on a ROAS basis and 3x of us. And I was just like, guys, this thing is crushing for you. Let's just all be honest with each other. Let's not worry about Fermat right now. You should just ride this as hard as you possibly can. And just, if you're able to print money, just print money. The fact that your business is going to do better, that's great, right? I'll tell you offline who it was. You know them. So it was crazy to me that this was happening. And then over the last 4 months or 5 months, ever since that like fateful Sunday when that overspend happened.
We'll never forget that day. It's like
Yeah.
the second most traumatizing day outside of the iOS 14 rollout.
Oh, dude.
June 20th of 2021, whenever adoption increased to 80% for iOS 14.
Exactly. And ever since then, I've been hearing like less about it. And now the large majority of our customers, at least, are like, it's one strategy amongst many, right? So I'm curious, like, how you think about it. What is your current perspective on ASC, and like, what are you recommending to your other like CMO friends, basically?
Yeah, the way you just summarized it is exactly where we've kind of landed with AS. It's one strategy amongst many. It was ripping for us, crushing it. Web and Shop was doing well. Then Web and Shop started to degrade, so we moved over to Web only. Then that started to degrade, and now it's just kind of like there. It's no longer ripping. The performance isn't stellar, but it's not abysmal. It's just kind of there. What makes it difficult is the amount of volatility that I've seen with ASC. There will be days where these campaigns will do quite well, and I'm like, I can't feed the machine enough money, that day. And then there'll be days where it's like, it just, it's like, you won yesterday, I got to give you a loss today. Sorry, buddy. And it just tanks the next day, right? And I'm like cutting back the spend. I'm like, no. It takes a lot of patience and sort of discipline to not be so overreactive, but the amount of volatility that we see in ASC makes it difficult to scale. It makes it, and I like Taylor Holiday somewhere right now is like sensing, his spidey senses are tingling, but without some sort of functionality like a cost cap in an ASC, the amount of unpredictability that objective has, it makes it tough to scale. I think having a cost cap, I can at least, jack my budget up to whatever we can tolerate, set a cost cap, and then sort of have a little bit more control over the variability. And that's how I use cost caps, by the way. It's really, for me, it's a control for variability and sort of trying to smooth out some of those ups and flows, not at all to limit spend, but to smooth it out. And yeah, AFC doesn't have that. And so I'm talking like one day we'll be hitting, just throw out numbers. We'll be hitting like a 3x ROAS, and then the next day we'll be hitting a 1.5, right? We're losing money on it. So it's where we're kind of using it. We've been doing a lot of the agile testing with Meta. And so like creative diversification is absolutely needed. We went through, there's a case study that's going to be coming out. It might be out already by the time this episode launches, but we ran a case study with Meta, a public case study on the creative diversification, understanding like the assets that, like whether or not that actually makes a difference. So we ran a couple of UGC and statics versus more polished. And yeah, we saw, I want to say 19% decrease in CPA. Don't quote me on the exact number, but it was a significant decrease. And so that tells me, okay, the machine does need more stuff. Where I am finding wins is theming my content. So my product works for men and women, and I will have certain angles that resonate best with certain audiences or certain demographics. And so I'll theme and bucket ASC within those groupings. So I'm thinking, okay, who is the type of person, or who is the client or the customer that would see this message and this message would resonate? And I group all those ads together. And then I'll do the same thing for a second and a third campaign. So that at least helps me with like, it's like almost helping the machine and the campaign, like, hey, you just got to get really good at going after this persona and this type of customer. And here's all the tools at your disposal. And I do that across multiple. So that's working for us. I think, when we're doing like landing page and offers, having one ASC campaign per offer seems to help as well. So expansion diversification is still important, but then like if you can group and find pockets to like make it more efficient, and it's not lazy, but just do some of the work for the machine, that seems to help a little bit. I will say though, and I don't know if this is like because there really is just one top ad, or if it's like the machine is degrading, but whenever ASC first launched, I want to say that it was better at diversifying and allocating the spend across multiple ads. Nowadays, I'm finding that it's like picking one or two ads and that's it. And
Yeah.
so, you know, if
We see the same
something's
thing.
changed,
We see it look and behave more similarly to like what CBOs typically do, which is like
Mhm.
in your CBO, I don't know if you guys run CBOs, but like a bunch
No.
of our customers run CBOs, and basically what ends up happening is, yeah, there's like one or two winners, and then the majority starts to funnel there. And really what it's useful for is just like, okay, like at the end of the day, you start off broad, but like Facebook is finding your audience. So actually your theming thing makes a ton of sense to me, because you're actually saying like, hey, you're gonna like funnel in onto a single persona anyway. So instead of trying to like combat that by putting ads that appeal to like women age 50 and men age 20 at the same time, I'm just gonna let you do
Yeah.
that, and do that as effectively as possible. So I love that way of thinking about it. That's
Yeah,
super
it's
interesting, man. How are you? So what have you been using on the measurement side that tells you all of these things about the effectiveness of ASC? And are you just using all in-platform data? Are you using other forms of data to do this analysis? Like if I'm sitting at another brand and I'm like, shit, should I be doing the same thing? Like what was the process you used to actually measure those outcomes?
so I'm running split tests within Meta, and then I am using the in-platform metrics. You know, at the end of the day, well, let me backtrack. I'm using split tests, I'm using in-platform metrics, and then to overcome some of the modeling and attribution, I actually use Zapier to upload my Shopify events into Meta through an offline conversions event set, or it's called offline conversions API. So this was a feature that was built for retail stores, and it was meant to help retailers attribute their in-store sales back to Meta ads using customer data such as the order ID, the value of the cart, their email address. And I use that because it doesn't measure 100% of your total conversions. It's off by 40%. You have to be very comfortable at looking at like half of your ROAS and almost double or triple your CPAs, but it's not modeled. So it can be used directionally. And what I'll do is I will use a split test. I'll go in platform and I'll actually look at the ROAS, and I'll validate what the ROAS is telling me in platform with the offline conversions API, looking at 1-day click. This is what I was going to get to. At the end of the day, if Facebook, and this is for all my advertisers around less than $500,000 a month, if Facebook believes it got a sale and it attributes that sale to to that ad set, that is signal that Facebook has to then go and find more sales that could actually legitimately be sales as well. When you shop off and make a decision and say like, oh, I'm going to use a third-party analytics tool, I'm going to use Google Analytics last click. Oh, this one doesn't look profitable. Let me turn this ad set off. Even though Facebook believes that this ad set is driving a 2.5x or 3x ROAS, by you shutting that ad set off, you are prohibiting potential future revenue, because the system does have high degree of confidence and belief that it is driving sales, that it is modeling out and saying, hey, we're driving these sales. And this is where the offline conversions API, offline sales, offline purchases attribution helps, because you can sort of like fact check it a little bit. Again, it's not perfect, but like if you see ROAS that is within a threshold that you can say like, yeah, actually this data is modeled, but I know it's within this range and this range. And you kind of have to just trust the system. But I've leaned more into the third-party analytics tools have become more of the holistic marketing dashboards for me. It's like, here's a snapshot of my total business health, my total ad spend. But in terms of budget decisions and optimizations, I'm not trusting that. I'm trusting what Facebook is telling me. And I'm going to move money into where Facebook believes is driving the outcomes. And I'll just use my third-party analytics tool to see like, oh, if I moved if I double the budget of this ad set because this is what Facebook believes, and if I kill this campaign because Facebook believes it's not driving any sales, how does that look on my contribution dollars at the end of the day? And if, in response to these changes, I see positive outcomes here, cool, I can continue to trust the system.
Exactly.
And that's what I've found to be more simple, less headache. It's more black and white, it's more Boolean decision making, right? Once you set those benchmarks of like, if this, do this, if that, do that instead, it doesn't complicate things. And I think marketers and media buyers, and the last thing I'll say is marketers and media buyers just need to have a better grasp and better communication with finance and whoever is dealing with like the total business outcomes, because that's what you should be optimizing for. And if you don't have visibility into that, then yeah, like that's why there's this surge of third-party analytics tools, because they're blind to the actual business outcomes that are happening from them turning off that ad set or turning off that ad.
Yeah, totally. And the one thing, just for context, that I wanted to remind people is that you guys actually do a lot of channels. Like, it's not like you're saying, hey, I'm using the in-platform data and you're like a $3 million brand that only advertises on Facebook. Like, you guys are running
Wherever.
a very large amounts of channels and finding that the most valuable way to make decisions on how to allocate spend within Facebook is using the in-platform data, while using the third-party tools as a way to get a bird's eye view on channels in general. And so like, I think that's like important framing, because a lot of people, I still meet a lot of people who just straight up tell me to my face, like, there's no way I can trust Facebook data. And I'm not, it's like hard for me to, I understand why that's, again, like, I'm not trying to say anything negative. I understand why that's sentiment, but if you're making within platform decisions, it's very hard to say that you can make good in-platform decisions using data that is different from the platform itself, from what the platform itself is seeing, right? So it's just like, I mean, you're fighting just such a hard battle at that point.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll say this, this approach is like, we're running display as well through Kargo, which is a private marketplace for display. It's my previous employer, and so we're running a new product that they're launching where they can, I pay based off of cost per click, and so that is that level of attribution does, like, it's display ads. People are reading an article and they see the ad and they may go and Google it directly. There's never a click involved. So it's like nearly impossible to measure from a click through. But then again, if I know I spent $1,000 or $2,000 on this channel, on this medium, and I see that I'm negative $2,000 in my contribution dollars compared to like what it typically is on a 7-day average, then I know, oh, I lost money here. But if I see it's flat, or if I see it's actually up, then I'm like, okay, this $1,000 investment here, whatever the sort of the shift in my average daily contribution dollars, this is the positive, and I can sort of extrapolate an ROI there. Super simple. Don't even have to get involved with the analytics. It's like money in, money out. So yeah, to your point of running this across multiple channels, it works. It's, and you can do post-purchase surveys and you can do some other stuff to like triangulate, kind of like what the true effect is. But if you have trust issues with Meta and you're like, no, but I need to know to the decimal point what the ROAS is, it's difficult. If anyone had the answer, if everyone had the answer, if it was a simple answer, everyone would have it. And that means that things would just get even more competitive. What I will say is, if you're at a stage where you don't trust Meta, then you fall into two buckets. You're either a bucket where you were able to grow from an outside channel, such as TikTok or organic. And so Meta's a new channel, right? And those are rare, but they're there. If that's the case, like, you can use post-purchase surveys, or you can try to build a media mix model or do some incrementality testing if you wanted to. Heck, Meta even does incrementality testing on your behalf for free, and you can see what the true impact of Meta is. But if you're a brand that doesn't fall into those buckets, then you're either you're either really small and Meta, like, you are maybe overcomplicating your media mix, and you should just pick one channel and get to 50 million in 12-month trailing revenue, and then diversify your channels. Or you are a large brand, you're above 50 million, and now you have diversified channels, at which case, like, how did you even get to this stage if you didn't trust the platform to begin with, right? So,
That's pretty
I
funny.
think people need to, I would encourage people to lean in. And if you really don't trust it, turn your Facebook ads off for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then measure what happens. Just turn it off for a month, or sorry, for 2 weeks, and measure what happens 2 weeks after that and see. And I will say the asterisk there is that you won't see the effects right away. There's a halo effect of about 2 weeks before the results really kick in. But chances are you're going to see your email subscribers decrease, your SMS, flow and revenue decrease. You're going to see Google ads, search impression volume decrease. You're going to see your Amazon sales tank. This has been an interesting one for me. The correlation between our Amazon sales and our Facebook ad spend is like a 0.87, right? So we're now measuring things
Oh my
holistically.
God.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm entering a rant now. I think I've learned to trust Meta. I've stepped out of line and like, oh, let me, shiny object syndrome, let me check out all these tools. But when you run the math and when you like start to crunch the numbers, it just doesn't make sense to not trust the system that is using the attribution signal to then guide itself for future acquisition, for future revenue.
All right, man. I'm going to use Signal as our next pivot. Okay. Here we go. Shopify Audiences 2.0. Okay. Shopify is telling you, hey, let's put some signal into Facebook. We'll tell you who are likely purchasers of your brand, and let's see what happens. So, do you know John by any chance?
I have not met John. No.
Okay. He's awesome. Super nice guy. Actually, Snow Agency just got acquired by Avenue Z as a separate point. But here's like the most interesting thing about the results that he is seeing. Seeing same trends on nearly every account we test on. Lower CPA and higher ROAS. Okay. My read, and I'm curious what you're taking away from this, is if you have a lower CPA and a higher ROAS, what it means is that the effect likely is from conversion, and which is coming later, as opposed to AOV, right? Because sometimes you can drive higher ROAS, same conversion with same CPA, and the higher ROAS comes from the fact that you're doing other tricks to like actually increase the purchase value, right? So, okay, that makes sense, which actually means it's like an intent thing. This is the part that is fascinating. Higher CPMs and OCPCs. So more expensive to get the impression and the click. And so he's saying that these higher conversion rate outweighs the CPC, right? He is sharing some data, right? Like let's scan through what he's shared here. It's a little small, so sorry about that, but here we go.
The CPMs are actually incredible. I would kill for $11 CPMs. These are.
Oh yeah, on average. Yeah. So here we go. So the click-through rate looks roughly the same, right? It's just that the CPM, so these are more expensive people to bid on. And conversion rate, this is like where it's like insane to me. Look at the delta between these things. One is like a 4.8 and the other one is like 11.4. I mean, 11 is a ridiculous conversion rate. I don't know. I mean, I've seen conversion rates north of 10% exactly twice before. So yeah, out of like hundreds of brands that I've spoken to. So I don't know what you make of this. And then I'll just scroll through so you can see some of the other like back and forth of people being like asking some questions. But yeah, these are not retargeting audience.
What size did he say? He said there was a size. So they are
280,000, 101.3 million, and then 8 million.
Those are healthy in size.
Yeah.
The 280 is a little bit smaller for us. I mean, we're at a point where I need audiences to be closer to 3 or 5 million to see longevity and scale, or else it's just going to stay at like $500 a day, which is kind of like what he was at, right? His total spend per grouping was about $2,000, and I think he ran it from July 28th through the 9th. I want to say
exactly. So this is okay. Man,
So
so
like
yeah, of
11
course, you're
days.
like, yeah, exactly. So you're exactly on it. So this is like the biggest thing that I felt when I saw this is audiences products are tough. They're tough
Yeah.
because fundamentally what you're doing, especially if you have an 11% conversion rate, this is me being a little skeptical, but if you have that high of a conversion rate, you've got to ask yourself, how many of these types of people are there out there?
Right.
Right. And like, can I actually scale this over time? And it's really hard to believe that's possible. It's for me right now with this data, it's really hard to believe that.
I agree with you, right? Because at the end of the day, these audiences aren't like net new, right? They are audiences that Meta would have already found. Maybe Meta already knows that they're there and they're like bookmarked because they're going to help subsidize some bad inventory one day. So now you're like, no change, but you're already hitting those people. And I think, he's spending about $181 a day per ad set. Like that's really small. I imagine that if this test were to continue, or if he were to scale this up to maybe $1,000 per day per ad set, you would see things start to kind of come in line. So my takeaway is if you're a small brand and you're maybe spending $100,000 on Facebook ads, like, yeah, run these all day. Go ahead and get all the low hanging fruit because you want that cash flow and that margin to then reinvest back to then, have better cash flow. The issue is do not put all your eggs in this basket because the chances of this being a scalable long-term solution are small. I mean, they're audiences that Meta already has. They're not, these aren't new users that were brought in that make Facebook accounts. They're already there. And you're going to get to a certain spend threshold where you will outpace the size. That's why my mind immediately went to like, what size are these? Because at my spend levels, the 8 million, I could maybe, keep around for a little bit, but I highly doubt that all 8 million of those people are going to yield that 8 or 11% conversion rate. That's just like a lookalike. There's 121. Right. Is it 121 women? I think it's 100. There's 121 million targetable women between the ages of 18 to 65 plus, right? That's 8 million of that audience, so you're not talking about like, it's 6%. That is 6% of total addressable. So like, it's the chances of you outpacing this, especially if you were to like put this over a 6-month time horizon, you're going to outpace it. You're going to hit a good chunk of these people already. So great for low spenders. I'm gonna test it out, right? And if I'm wrong, I'll eat my words and I'll screen share and like, yep, I was wrong. 3 months, 12 months later, I'm still running these audiences. But yeah, I think the precaution is just you have to diversify your tactics. Just like we opened up the conversation with ASC, and it's like one tactic of many. Like have this as one tactic of many. Continue to do broad, continue to run your interests, continue to run your ASC, continue to run your Shopify audiences, and let all of those things run in parallel when you're at that spend level where you can do that. If you're, again, spending $300,000 a month or less, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Keep it simple.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad Shopify is doing this, but Shopify needs to hire someone who is amazing at helping them think about how can we help our brands acquire new customers cost effectively. They should not be investing all of this time and money and honestly public PR cycles in efforts that are short term. That's my honest opinion. I'm like, they're a commerce company and I get it. It's super hard to be excellent at ad tech and commerce at the same time. But man, just hire an amazing ad tech leader who will help your brands acquire new customers, because fundamentally that company pivots on two things. Can I make more D2C brands exist or more brands exist? And can I help them acquire customers? And like, that's a thriving economy. And so it's a noble mission to be on, but they just need somebody to help them with that second one. Yeah, when you run this test, I'm going to be very curious to see what happens too, by the way.
I'll get it live
I'm
today.
very excited. You'll get it live today?
I'll get it live today. Yeah. Well, I hate getting stuff live before 12. So I've got 30 minutes before it's my cutoff time, or else it'll go live tomorrow. But yeah, I'll get it live, and I'm excited to see. I think to your point about Shopify audiences, you know, I don't know enough to fully like speak to the product yet, but it's always been fascinating that Shopify could take this position of being a kind of like what Axiom and LiveRamp and some of these other data aggregators did, right? They could sell these audiences and not sell them, but like license out, especially if they can get a little bit more specific, knowing that these customers use ShopPay to buy across these brands, these verticals. And so here's like a group of people that have kids. These are new parents. These are a group of people that have been buying a lot of furniture for their house. This is a group of people that, you know, and now you can get a little bit niche and specific. And if you can license that out, maybe for like email lists, email blasts, or, you know, outside of Meta, doing like display retargeting, or doing, you know, TikTok or Snap, or some of these other items that are a little bit more, you know, higher funnel, and maybe the algorithms aren't as juiced up as Meta's, for example. That's where I think they could see some shortfall opportunities, and those publishers would love that, because they're not driving as efficient ROAS as what Meta is, and so it's hard for them to get ad spend allocation. Everybody's always going to allocate money into what is driving the highest ROAS, and it's been Meta this whole time.
Yeah, totally. Awesome, man. That's all the topics I have for today. Should we wrap it there?
Yeah, let's wrap it. I'm going to go get this test live and start seeing how Shopify audiences perform at $10,000 a day and spend. Just kidding.
All right.
Not 10. That's the goal. 10K is the goal. We'll start at 1K and we'll see. But all right, we'll see you next time.
Leave it there.